Hello, and welcome back to the Argyle HR Leadership Forum Tech Check 2022. My name is Michael with Argyle. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our esteemed speaker. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. Now, to ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. And now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Deborah Kunes, Senior Business Psychologist with Workday. We're excited to have Deborah for her thought leadership presentation titled State of Engagement 2022. Welcome, Deborah. Over to you.
Thank you very much. The employee experience is constantly evolving, driven in part by external factors that impact all industries, as well as changes within individual sectors. But in order to understand the true state of employee engagement within an organisation, it's critical to benchmark different aspects of that experience against companies with a similar demographic. And each year we analyse changes in overall engagement, as well as individual engagement driver scores, to help identify focus areas and priorities for organisations across sectors for the future. This year, there are a number of areas that are relevant to the majority of organisations, which include adapting to new work models in the wake of the pandemic, talent retention, and reducing burnout through ongoing listening and ongoing conversations. During this session, we will review the key findings from Workday's latest State of Engagement 2022 report, and we'll talk through strategies that you can use to retain your talent, to reduce burnout as you continue through the year. My name is Debs Kunes. I'm a senior psychologist here at Workday, and I specialise in employee engagement and development. And I've worked in the design, implementation and embedding of employee voice and employee engagement programs for the last 10 years. I'll be taking you through the results of our latest report today. Before I begin, I have something quite important to say just regarding our safe harbour statement. Sometimes in some presentations you may hear forward-looking statements because we want to share as much as we can with everybody on what we're working on, so you know what's coming up. But this is to say, essentially, please only make any purchase of Workday services based on the services, the features and the functions that are currently available. So let's have a look at what our session looks like today. Firstly, I'll provide you with a brief overview of Workday, and then more specifically Workday Peakon Employee Voice, which is our employee listening and engagement platform. And I should say at this point that Workday Peakon Employee Voice is the official name, but I'll be shortening it to Peakon from now on today, just for ease. I'll then take you through some of the data from our latest analysis on the employee voice data that comes into Peakon, alongside some recommendations. For those of you who are new to Workday, this slide just shares a brief overview of who we are and some essential stats. We started in 2005 with a vision. And if we fast forward to today, there are over 13,000 of us around the globe, and we serve over 9,000 customers, including 70% of the Fortune 50 and 50% of the Fortune 500. And even with our sustained and fast-paced growth, we stay relentlessly focused on maintaining really strong customer satisfaction ratings. And we credit that to creating happy employees who deliver innovation and an unrivaled customer service experience. Workday acquired Peakon last year, and Peakon is an active engagement platform for employee listening. So before we go any further, let's just make sure we're all on the same page. What are we talking about when we say employee engagement? Well, engagement is a cognitive and an emotional state relating to the relationship between employees and employers. So it's about an employee's emotional commitment and connection to their work. And we see that an engaged employee brings their full self to work, often performing well beyond their required duties, and show a high degree of commitment. They tend to identify areas where they can use their skills effectively to grow. They take pride in their working space, and they advocate the business to others. Peakon enables organisations to measure and track levels of engagement, and the aspects of the employee experience that we know drive engagement on a more continuous basis. So I'd like now to share a quick video with you to set the scene and to introduce you to the platform, and particularly in terms of how it's supporting leaders to better support their people.
I use Workday Peakon Employee Voice to manage my team and keep a pulse check on how they're doing. So when you think about like a heartbeat, right? Are they healthy? Are they engaged? Do they feel good? Do they have the tools and the resources to do their job, but also have work-life balance? Previously, we would have had to look back 12 weeks. Now I can go in and look and see real time, how is the team feeling? How are they doing? And it's absolutely the employee's voice that we're hearing.
It helped me understand their situation, put that empathy in place, and understand how I can help them. One, with this particular survey, I was hearing they have too many meetings to go to. Two, that could cause the burnout. With Workday Peakon Employee Voice, it helped me know it sooner than later.
A big part of our culture is vibe, value, inclusion, belonging, and equity. And if we're truly living our vibe culture, it's immediately, you'll see that response directly back from your team.
One of the aha moments for me was when I joined this team, I realized how much the team cares about diversity, and I couldn't have found out without the survey results.
It surprised me when the feedback from my team went all the way up to our top leadership. To hear that was pretty awesome. And to know that he's reading all of these comments, he's looking at the scores, and not just for my team, but across his org. So he understands how are his different leaders doing. It's really made the difference. It says, continue doing what you're doing in the good, and make sure you're also paying attention to where you need to course correct.
Workday Peakon Employee Voice has helped me being a better leader in terms of supporting my teams.
My number one job is to be a people leader and be the best one I can. It's a tool that I can use to continue to do that. So for me, it's an absolute added benefit.
So when Peakon was created, we made a very deliberate decision to adopt a consistent measurement system and methodology, because we knew that all of that valuable employee voice data would ultimately feed our analytics and feed our algorithms and build our standardized engagement benchmark data set. And we currently have over 244 million data points in our benchmark and 45 million comments. And this is growing every minute of every day. And one of the benefits of having such a wealth of standardized data is that it allows our data sciences team to observe trends and to make connections between employee perceptions and business metrics. It also means that we've been able to use that data to inform Peakon's analytics and algorithms, which include things like attrition prediction and sophisticated benchmarking that accounts for demographic differences in scoring trends. And it's from our benchmark data set, which is the world's largest standardized engagement data set, that we're able to see employee perception shifting over time. And that means that we're able to bring that insight to you and to your organizations. So each year we analyze changes in those trends. We look at overall engagement as well as individual engagement drivers to really help identify, well, what are the focus areas for organizations overall? And how does that differ across different industries and sectors? And all of that helps us to inform potential priorities as we look forward. Now, just a quick note on our methodology before we dive into the insights themselves. Our State of Engagement report is based on an analysis of de-identified global employee survey data submitted by employees across 1,500 companies through 2021. And our analysis compares the mean scores for overall engagement and individual engagement drivers between Q1 and Q4 2021 from nearly 9 million survey responses. Our benchmarks are based on rolling 12-month windows. So our Q1 averages are based on data from March 2020 through March 2021, and Q4 averages from December 2020 through December 2021. Peakon uses a 0 to 10 scale for all question responses, and as a general guideline, any change of greater than 0.1 is considered meaningful as part of this analysis. And finally, there are 17 industries included in our report, and these have been defined by the Global Industry Classification Standard. And only industries with a sufficient sample size of data were included in the current analysis for validity purposes. So let's see how industries fared. The table that you can see on the slide there illustrates the 17 industries that we've looked at, ranked in order of highest engagement to lowest engagement levels. The average change in the engagement score across all sectors in 2021 was a decline of 0.03, which falls outside of the 0.1 threshold for meaningful change. However, when we look at changes across specific industries, we see a much more complicated story. We can see that through 2021, the software and services and technology sectors continued to solidify their positions at the top of the table, ranking first and second respectively. Joining them at the top of the table, finance and professional services were able to improve their rankings by maintaining overall engagement scores at a time when many other industries were negatively impacted by the pandemic. Industries that experienced a decline in overall engagement include healthcare, pharmaceuticals, non-profit, and transportation. And these are many of the same sectors that were impacted more directly by the pandemic for obvious reasons, and with many frontline workers who perhaps were unable to take advantage of hybrid work opportunities. So as a result, it's likely that engagement in these sectors has also been impacted by the various health and well-being implications of working through a pandemic. If we look at pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, and life sciences, we can see that the largest overall ranking drop across all industries. And this sector went from first place in Q1 to sixth place in Q4. And this was the largest drop, down 0.23 points, which is really quite significant. And if we look at healthcare, which is working in a sort of similar space, we can see that there's a 4-point drop in ranking. And in fact, it declined 0.16, which takes it from fourth place to eighth place. Transportation was one of the lower ranking industries across the sectors to begin with, and this has dropped 4 places from 11th to 16th. And in addition to this, in terms of the score change for engagement, it actually had the largest overall drop of 0.29. There's been ongoing damage to this sector over time. So, for example, less people travelling in the last few years, less freight, less tourism, uncertainty around future work security, to name a few. And all of these things have had an impact. So it's really quite understandable as to why this sector may have been so heavily impacted. On the flip side, industries that have made meaningful improvements to their overall engagement score are capital goods and manufacturing. But despite making progress, both industries remain in the bottom half of the table due to relatively low mean scores overall. So for each of the 17 industries in our report, we've ranked the engagement drivers from high to low based on their position compared to other industries at the end of 2021. And today I'm going to review 4 specific industries in more depth, and they will be commercial and professional services, healthcare, higher education, and technology. Don't worry if your interest is more in other industry breakdowns. We will share a link to the full report for you to read at your leisure just after this session. So let's start with commercial and professional services. Within this sector, which includes organisations providing commercial printing, environmental and facility services, and office services and supplies, we can see that there are a number of drivers that have improved over the course of 2021, and they include environment, autonomy, recognition, and reward. Environment and autonomy increases are most likely due to an increase in flexible work opportunities as a result of, active employee listening approaches during the pandemic. We see that workload rankings increased from 7th to 3rd, despite a drop in mean score, demonstrating that this sector has really been able to mitigate the impact of increased workload, which perhaps may be a result of more focus on recognition and reward. And we might suggest that meaningful work and goal setting should be priorities for this sector through 2022 to really keep the momentum on advances that have already been made. The second sector we're looking at today is healthcare, and considering the nature of the pandemic, which placed a huge strain on healthcare workers around the world, it's not surprising to see that the majority of drivers saw a drop in rankings during 2021, with perceptions of strategy and workload seeing the biggest decline. One thing is clear in this sector, and perhaps not surprising, employees derive a huge sense of meaning from their work. This is highlighted by the fact that meaningful work is ranked first across all industries, with a mean score of 8.33. Perceptions of accomplishment also rank highly, which measures the degree to which employees feel they're accomplishing things on a day-to-day basis, which is great to see. The only driver score to increase for this sector was environment, which may be due to things like better protection for frontline workers who are often exposed to physical health risks as part of their job. And at the beginning of 2021, this sector ranked fairly well for a number of drivers, but it appears that the ongoing challenges are starting to take their toll. And when we look at the data, the goal for many healthcare organisations really should likely be to define and communicate a clear strategy for employees, while also ensuring that workload pressures don't get too much. And for this sector, it's not surprising perhaps that people feel their workload is higher, potentially less manageable. Even if things are potentially starting to improve, that long-term overwork can really start to impact people over the longer term. And if we think about strategy, which is about how employees understand where the organisation is going, if we think about this in a slightly different way, during the depths of the pandemic, strategy was very clear. It was about what's happening today. It was about managing the pandemic. It was the immediate thing that everybody was facing. It was the number one issue. And as we're starting to emerge from that situation, there's been a little bit of a vacuum in terms of what's next. You know, what's the big ticket thing that we need to focus on now as we start to emerge? And perhaps the healthcare industry has less focus on, you know, what was going to happen next than other sectors. The third sector of focus today is higher education. And we saw that organisations within this sector made meaningful progress on a number of key drivers during 2021. Most notably in environment and reward. The reward driver jumped 6 places thanks to a mean score improvement of 0.2, which actually represents the largest increase for reward across all of the industries that we looked at. Perceptions of the environment also improved, with a driver score increasing by 0.35, which resulted in a rankings increase of 5 places. And some other notable improvements include perceptions of growth, recognition, and freedom of opinions. So with all but one engagement driver in the top 10, the priority for higher education in 2022 should really be aimed at workload. And a slip in rankings for organisational fit may also indicate that higher education organisations could do more to create a sense of belonging among employees. We know that a sense of belonging can have a huge impact on key business metrics and the employee experience. You know, research has found that when employees feel like they belong, they perform on average 56% better, turnover risk can drop by up to 50%, and sick days can reduce by 75%. So this is a fundamental component that remains critical to all organisations. And then the fourth area of focus is the technology sector, which includes communications and electronics equipment and technology hardware. And we saw that this sector was the second highest performing overall in 2021, with meaningful improvements for 12 out of 14 key drivers of engagement. And we saw notable ranking changes around areas including strategy, accomplishment, and goal setting. We see that perception of meaningful work as the lowest ranked driver in 2021 for technology. And so creating a connection between day-to-day work and positive impact on customers is one area that these organisations might focus on. You know, increasing visibility and communication around customer stories perhaps is one avenue, as well as giving employees the opportunity to connect with customers on a more regular basis, regardless of their role. So why does all this matter? Why is engagement so critical to organisations today? Why are we talking about this? Well, there is a plethora of research out there that's demonstrated strong connections between levels of engagement and other business metrics. And we've even been able to demonstrate that with our own customers of Peakon around metrics such as attrition, safety incidents, and productivity. And in their 10th employee engagement meta-analysis, which was the largest study of its kind to date, with data from over 100,000 teams, Gallup found that business units within a company with highly engaged employees benefited from lower regretted attrition, higher productivity, and greater customer satisfaction and profitability. So what we're talking about here is about adding significant value to organizations through our people. And it's really about engagement being embedded in organizations as a strategic tool. Of course, having happy, engaged workforces who have a great experience is just the right thing to do. And in some ways, you could say it's a happy coincidence that this also benefits the organizations that they work for. But there are an endless number of reasons why engagement is a critical focus for organizations today. And having an employee voice strategy that is robust has become a key component of an employee value proposition. Employees coming into the workforce today expect to have mechanisms in place where their feedback can be provided and their opinions can be shared. So realistically, surveying once a year probably isn't going to hit the mark anymore. And given that we're currently working through a time where talent retention and attraction is more difficult than ever, mobility is at a peak, businesses really can't afford to neglect this area. And then from an organizational decision-making perspective, having more continuous feedback and employee voice data to work with is just critical for informing good business decisions. And that's really helping organizations to navigate the ever-changing and evolving environment that we find ourselves in at the moment. And of course, the idea that business performance improves when people are happy at work isn't new, but most workplaces actually are still struggling to deliver on that. Many organizations can often confuse, strategic, systematic focus with the fun factor. So trying to boost engagement with thinking about unlimited snacks and the pool table and fruit bowls and bean bags and that kind of thing. So why do organizations settle for the status quo? Why is there still this disconnect between what businesses say about engagement and how they try to improve it? Well, one reason is ownership. So historically, engagement has been typically siloed in HR, but tackling engagement demands continuous, meaningful change across the employee lifecycle. And realistically, HR only touches a fraction of those moments. So it just doesn't have the bandwidth to take sole responsibility. So that responsibility should really be devolved down through the layers of the organization to the people who can practically have the biggest impact day to day, our leaders and our managers. And external engagement consultancies aren't a great fit either, often taking many months and more dollars to create a single snapshot of engagement that can be out of date before you've even read it. The second reason is lack of incentive. Most businesses haven't prioritized engagement quickly because they haven't had to. In 2020, when global engagement was at 20%, Fortune's Global 500 achieved record high revenue of $33.3 trillion. So an engaged workforce was certainly desirable, but success didn't overtly hinge on it. But we can't afford to focus on engagement to be a nice to have anymore. There are more reasons than ever to make it a strategic focus. One of those is about the collective reevaluation of priorities that has happened. The pandemic has pushed many employees to really question their priorities and reassess the role that work plays in their lives. Especially for frontline workers facing new pressure and personal risk, the terms of the work equation have changed forever. New work models are disrupting the employee experience for traditional office-based workers, which brings new challenges that can threaten engagement. And a growing awareness of historical inequality also means that demands for change are louder than ever. Employees want to know that an organization is making progress in these areas, but the truth is that many organizations still aren't. And global unrest and social justice movements have really brought up questions around ethics and power dynamics too. So many employees now are questioning the role that their organization plays in helping or hindering the causes that matter to them. And they're ready to vote with their feet, as we've seen. Widespread environmental turbulence has also amplified calls for action in areas around sustainability. So having a strong corporate social responsibility and ESG strategy, as well as a really well articulated and concrete roadmap, are becoming major draws for talent and differentiators in the market. And then building a workplace culture that prioritizes safeguarding well-being has also become pivotal for improved people and business outcomes. But the truth is that most organisations still aren't doing enough in those areas. So to address all of these areas effectively and to understand clearly what's working, what's not working, and to enable more agility in decision making, businesses really need to be listening to employees and have them feeding into and driving their future strategies and decisions so that they can make sure that they get those right. And that's really what Peakon supports with. Peakon is really in existence to elevate the overall employee experience by enabling organisations to listen to the voice of employees, to understand what matters, and then to take action really quickly and really effectively. And underpinning the platform are our 3 core pillars of intelligent listening, total activation, and execution analytics. And we really see these as our North Star in terms of how Peakon is designed and how it will continue to evolve. So intelligent listening is about our focus on enabling organisations to listen more and to track and drive engagement and the employee experience all the way through the employee lifecycle. Total activation is about our focus on empowering managers and employees to take ownership for action and change. So this is really moving away from engagement being HR-centric, HR-owned, and it's about devolving responsibility and ownership through the layers of the business, through things like intuitive dashboards and automated analytics. And then execution analytics refers to our focus on how we enable businesses to use their employee voice data more strategically, really cementing that employee voice data as a core business tool. And our robust benchmark data has enabled us to do things like create algorithms that provide intelligence on things like attrition prediction and lifecycle insights. So it's really all about how we use employee voice data intelligently to be more agile and much more strategic. So that's a whistle-stop tour of our report. I hope you've enjoyed this overview today. If you would like to read the full report, you'll be able to access this link via the chat that you should be able to see there. But that's it from me today. Thank you so much, Michael. I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Deborah, for such an insightful presentation. I also want to thank everyone for joining us today for this fantastic thought leadership. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event.